I am absolutely delighted to introduce my guest today, legendary producer, composer, arranger, and musician, Ronnie King. He has worked with artists such as Mariah Carey, Tyrese, Tupac Shakur, Snoop Dogg, The Offspring, Pepper, and Rancid, and many, many more. He's been known for his Moog keyboard and Hammond organ, a sound that has been sampled and copied countless times in hip-hop and popular music. He has worked on records that have sold millions of units. Ronnie, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, Ronnie, you've worked with some really multi-million selling acts and bands and artists. I want to take it a little bit back to the beginning, and I know you've probably answered this quite a few times. I know you come from a very, very musical family. I mean, all the way stretching back to your grandfather, right?
Sure, that's right. Yeah, they came from the Dust Bowl era here in the United States, which was a farm, kind of like the early farm laborers, and they all came from Arkansas and Oklahoma, coming to the West Coast to find money. Really was the thing, and they would pick during the day, and then during the weekends they would play the weekend barn dances.
And your grandfather, Henry King, he lived to 100 years old. Is that right?
He sure did. It was all that hard labor and good living, and I know the music, and he had a big family. I think they had 12 people and the 10 kids, and I think just all that, all that pure living and all that love and whatnot. Really, he was and played the banjo up until he was 100 years old, and he had no hearing, but he could still play. It was pretty interesting.
Now, in a lot of interviews that I've seen with you, you touched on this a little bit, but I actually want to go a little bit more in depth into your training. Now, you mentioned that you played the piano and you did choir. Let's go back a little bit more in detail. So, at what age did you really start music lessons?
Well, since I'm at the bottom of 7 kids in my family, my oldest sister was like 16 or 17 by the time I was born. So, I mean, by the time I was 5, they were teaching me piano, and we had a very musical family, so we had every instrument under the sun there. And so I kind of went through the lineup of instruments, and each one of us kids would pick a different instrument, and I just kind of latched onto the piano was kind of my thing. And so my sister started teaching me piano at 5, and she had a friend, and my brother had a couple friends that were very prolific at playing the piano classically and jazz as well. One was John Bacino, who became a partner to Stephen Sondheim in New York, and they did a lot of a lot of the Broadway shows and all that. And then Scott Smith, who's become a great instructor of jazz piano. And so I was in the right company. That was for sure.
Can I ask you a question? Do you have perfect pitch?
I do not have perfect pitch.
Or very trained relative pitch, I guess?
It's relative pitch. Exactly. Perfect pitch is where they can just play a note. But I'm kind of like more visual with my tone anyway. So I kind of, I hear notes, but I see them on a chart, basically on the music chart, just because of my training or whatever, with improvisation and also with theory. So that's kind of how I think of music in a way. I hear music, and then in my mind, I guess I put it on paper.
So you're able to relate the music theoretically relative to the key and harmonies. And so that's quite a bit of training. Did you learn that from your family, the theory? Because most kids, when they take lessons, they just read and then they reproduce what they read, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. But you seem to have a really deep understanding of how music functionally works.
Yeah, I think early on they had my ear training was pretty extensive, and then getting to a level of reading, it just sort of played into it a little better. My piano teachers used to really get mad at me because I would go, "Hey, play this sheet," play this sheet of music for me, and I'd kind of look at it and I'd kind of listen to it, and then I'd go back and kind of just by ear, I guess, in a weird way, be able to replay it. And they're like, "You're not reading the music." I said, "How do you know?" Well, because you're kind of skipping over some stuff, but you're close, you know? So, close is good, you know?
Did anybody mentor you, or were your family members, were they all theoretically based? Did they all know like how music worked and it was all just common
They
knowledge?
read, yeah, they were good readers, and that's why I got into reading music at an early age. And then when I went to college, and kind of a funny thing, when I was in high school, Berkeley School of Music brought a extension to a college here in the Palm Springs area. And so I went through my training with Berkeley while I was in high school because nobody wanted to take the class. It was kind of a new thing. And I was in high school and they were just like, you know what, you should be taking this class. So they sponsored me to do the whole program.
Wow, that's great. Berkeley, by the way, I'm also an alumni.
What's that?
I went to Berkeley too. I
Oh,
graduated
yeah,
2012.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't exactly get to go to the college because they had this extension here at a college where I was, but the theory and the jazz theory was from Berkeley. So the the ear training and whatnot and the reading, and then I was still pretty much doing classical for a couple years when I went to college, and then I was kind of done with it. My teacher said, "Hey, man, look, you're really good and everything. You're not made up for the LA Symphony. You might as well go into, another part of the industry." And I said, "Wow, that was the biggest relief ever because I hated having to be so structured."
Which is ironic because I believe you would have liked to hang out with Bach and Beethoven. Those guys, they could improvise too.
Exactly. They were very improvisational, and I love Ravel, and a lot of jazz guys really got me into Ravel because he was very spirited in his approach to music.
Now, I wanted to actually ask you, did you have a mentor of any kind? I know you have a musical family, but was there somebody out of the family who kind of took you under their wing and kind of gave you advice and trained you, gave you, that kind of thing?
Early on, like I say, it was John Bacino and Scott Smith. They were the two guys that when I was really young, they were like, "Hey, this kid's got a gift." And then I studied with the jazz. I studied with Scott Smith more. He was a very, very interesting character when it came to jazz improvisation. And then John Bacino was more into the songwriting aspect of it. Loved the Beatles and loved the structure of writing songs, and that's why he went into into that field of writing songs for the Broadway shows and more like that. So I kind of had them both, and I would say they would be the mentoring factor. And then in my classical years, Virginia Waring, who was a wife to a gentleman named Fred Waring, used to have a lot of piano competitions and stuff. And so that was a real challenge to try to be at that real serious classical level. But like I say, I would always get there. And then I'm like, this is a little too structured for me. I need to be a little more freer in my expression. And then, so that was it. I kind of had like three different kinds of areas that kind of rounded me out, I guess. And that's why I was able to go into Hollywood and get involved with the early days of sampling and all that stuff, because I could literally just sit there, listen to the song once, and then replay the thing.
You worked with Timmy T on his #1 hit, right? One More Try.
I sure did.
Were you touring with him, or were you?
Yeah, I toured.
Or Did you play on that record?
I didn't play on One More Try. He actually did that himself in his garage for $800, and it became a #1 hit in the country. Absolutely amazing. And at that point, my management and stuff said, "Look, man, you don't need everybody. You don't need all this crazy stuff, man. Just write a great song."
How did he go from the garage to #1 on Billboard? How does that work?
Well, he was from Bakersfield, and there was a couple of people coming from Bakersfield. Of course, in California. Bakersfield was a big country songwriting mecca for, Tom Petty and Buck Owens and uh, a few other artists were coming from there. So that area had a lot of songwriting kind of lineage there. And he was just sitting in his thing, and then he came to LA, probably, and just, I mean, when I met him, he was under management with Maury Alexander, who ended up managing me, and that's how I got in contact with Timmy. And Timmy needed someone that could organize his, I guess they would call it a music supervisor
Oh,
of
like a
some
music
sort,
director kind of thing?
or a music director for his live shows. And then we recorded a bunch of records. I can't exactly remember all the songs, but I didn't do the hits with him. But that was really fun because it was another kind of analytical thing. Was I'm like, how did this dude chords and make this song? And it really pushed me to go, you know what? You don't have, it's just a thing. You always talk about that it factor, and he definitely had it. There was no doubt about it. And it was a great time in my early career for sure.
Any interesting anecdote from that tour or touring with him?
Well, the best part of that tour was I was living in an apartment in the hood over in Fairfax and Venice Boulevard, which was it wasn't in Hollywood. There was nothing glamorous about it. I'd moved from the desert and just got an apartment with my brother down there. And the best thing was when the tour bus rolled up to this, not so great area and, just a little apartment. I went, wow, okay, that's fun. That was fun. And at the same time, being in LA at that particular time and being with the people I was with, a lot of people were in the Compton and Watts and kind of West LA type of world. And so I thought that was the coolest thing, man, seeing that tour bus show up. And then we toured probably, I don't know, for a year and a half, pretty strongly. And at that same time, we'd put a recording studio on the bus, and it just started the whole, this thing. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Now, how did you get into the world of hip hop? Now, and I guess that was a very important time in hip hop, and Tupac and Johnny J, and they were very seminal figures in that field. But prior to meeting them and that, were you exposed to hip hop before, and did you have any experience with that?
I was always into funk. I was always into funk music. I had bought my first keyboard was a Fender Rhodes and a Mini Moog. So that was like kind of the tools for funk music at the time. And I had this equipment. And so I met a gentleman named Richie Rich, who was with a group called the LA Dream Team. And they had a big song called, I don't know, I just remember, the roof is on fire. Come on, everybody. That. And then he's like, man, he goes, I'm at the studio every day and there's nobody that can like replay samples, and everybody's just kind of it was phasing into drum machines and production oriented stuff. And he goes, hey, I want to take you up to Jerry Heller's office and see if there's a place up there for you to spread your wings. And went up there, and Jerry goes, oh my God, this guy is perfect for what the process needed at the time. And LA was just the hotbed for gangster rap music. And so when I started with Tony G and Julio G. That was the early days for me. Mellow Man Ace, Kid Frost, all of the East, Chicano rap, Spanglish music. And that's exactly what I did. I'd go in there and they would say, hey man, then they started calling me like the frosting. Oh man, put the frosting on it, which would be added musical parts to, enhance these sort of primitive samples, I guess, but they were so cool. The samples were so cool, but technology was like filling up the sonic space, in the music, and then we were changing, really, like you say, it was a very important time in hip hop because we changed the way records were made from the East Coast because they loved East Coast sampling, sampling, sampling. And then we brought it over here and then we started replaying the samples, changing it, flipping it, we would call it. We would take the sample and then we would just flip it and like take this sample and reverse everything.
So you would transcribe, so you'd grab, like you'd listen to the record, you could transcribe it and just play it back.
Brain, right.
And then you could modify the, because you knew theory, you knew harmony, you could do things, right?
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. And then still keep the feel. So it wasn't the one thing I think is, I don't know, a strong point of my talent that I've been gifted with is to not be stiff or sterile. You can be very technical and very accurate, but sterile, because it's kind of two different brains, but for some reason I kind of had them both going. And then just hanging out with real great producers like Battle Cat and Fred Reck. And these guys were just street guys. And they always used to look at me like, how did you do that? And then they're like, well, whatever you just did, that was great. And we're on,
Now with hip hop, there's definitely a lot of wonderful rhythms there, a lot of interesting syncopation. But were there any trained musicians who knew theory and harmony in that community at that time?
It was all heart, man. I mean, rap music comes from the heart. There wasn't a lot of people getting, educated. It was just like, get a drum machine, get a sample. In the early days, I mean, the sampling was just so primitive, but they would make it work, And then, no, there wasn't no. I mean, there was guys like Scott Storch, who became a huge producer, who was, I think, more trained, but he was from the East Coast as well.
And you had a good friend, Johnny J, right, who I was reading his biography, and he had almost a full ride scholarship to Berkeley that he turned down. There were more and more great musical people starting to enter into the industry as well.
Yeah, Johnny was a real special person because he was just, I don't know, his ears were so knowledgeable of the sonic structure of music. He spent eons and years just studying analyzing music and beats and tones, and that's where he was brilliant, and then he would say, hey, put the spice on this, and I would come with a thing and he'd be like, let's just take that, let's just bump that up a bit, or he was so good at that.
Did he play piano, or were you his piano guy?
I was his piano guy. He was a drum programmer and producer.
That's right. The SP-1200, right? The drum machine.
That's correct. And it was funny because that was a 16-bit sampler, which was in today's world is very archaic, but it was very warm and it was a very part of just that genre and that time for us, And he was a genius at the SP-1200, And then later on, they came out with a MPC 2000, which had more sampling time, had a little different tone to it. And then guys kind of went that way with it. But Johnny just stayed in his lane. And that's what Tupac really loved about him. Because Tupac didn't like a lot of music on when he was rapping. He would always be like, just we'd go in there, make a beat for 30 minutes. He'd show up, go in there, knock his music, his raps out 2 or 3 times. And he's like, I'm out. You guys fix it up. You guys figure it out. And, the rest is kind of history.
But he was definitely musical, right? He definitely was very attuned to listening to what you guys were coming up with and could tell what he liked and what he didn't like.
Yeah, and he loved Johnny's drum programming, because Johnny was just so in depth and, like I say, so much music of the funk era, because that's kind of where we came from that G-funk all came from the early 70s funk bands originally. And then Johnny was able to take it and make it his own, and that's how it all kind of started with Pac. So anyways, there was a lot of guys kind of doing it, but Johnny definitely had his own style. And then when the hits started happening, it was just like, okay, that's our style. We're going to stick to that. And like I say, kind of the rest is history after that.
I want to get a sense of the of the musical climate at the time? Were people starting to move away from funk, and they wanted to break things down a little bit and not get too many parts in music and strip it down and get it more raw? Is that what was?
It was taking the rawness of the 70s funk music and putting it on the sampler. That's where that's where the whole thing started, was sampling, and DJs would have their turntables and they would take the sounds literally off the turntable and put it on the sampler. I mean, it's kind of the same thing we do now, but the technology wasn't as, developed, basically. So you had very short sampling times, and you had to be real creative on how you would get all that information into those early drum machines.
You mentioned that when you were working with Tupac, you said, we used to write 8 songs a day. Describe a typical day where you're writing 8 songs. What does that look like?
Well, I'd come in with Johnny, and there would be an engineer there, and we would sit there, and Johnny would call in other musicians, maybe to play the bass or play the guitar. Ricky Rouse played a lot of guitars. Greg Dalton played guitars. Cornelius Mims, who played on, these are all really, they played on a lot of records, these guys. So he'd kind of combust us and get us all in the studio, and we would sit there, I don't know. These guys didn't like to start early, so we'd probably start about 3 in the afternoon. And kind of get warm, go through a couple different styles of tracks. Maybe by 6, we would have 3 or 4 tracks done. And then Pac would show up after dinner and go till, 2 or 3 in the morning. And we would just have all these songs kind of developed, and he would be, hey, I like that one. I don't like that one. I'm going to take 30 minutes, make me something else. And then we would go in there and basically just structure a song. And then he would come in and go, man, I'm digging that one, or whatever he would be feeling. So we did so many songs in a day. And then Pac was so fluent, of course, with his vocals and what he wanted to say.
So was he a virtuoso? Was he, in the sense that he was creating on the spot and rapid fire?
Yeah, he was a poet, man. There was no doubt about it. I mean, he was, and we all know that. I mean, they have college courses on, the real depth of where he was, but he was so knowledgeable about social things and had a lot to pick from, and he knew who he was, and he knew what he wanted to express. So he could come in there, hear the song, he'd go, oh man, yeah, this is a cruising track, or yeah, man, this is a sad track, or this is a let's go to the club track. And then he would just accordingly do his thing according to how he felt about those songs. And history says, yeah, we were doing 8 songs, and there's so many songs that aren't even out that we did. I mean, we did this for years,
Wow. So you're saying there's plenty of posthumous stuff yet to be released?
There's so much music in those catalogs, man. It's just and Johnny's catalog, and then the stuff that Johnny and I would be doing, even outside of Death Row. I mean, we'd go back to the house and keep recording. It was just kind of one of those things. You didn't want the party to stop. You wanted to keep recording.
Describe your keyboard playing. What was your thinking creatively? Now you're saying you were coming up with these parts. If you could get a bit technical with me now, so. How would you think musically in that situation where you're dealing with hip hop? What are the characteristics of your keyboard parts?
Well, for me, like I say, it's kind of about the tools, So we love the Fender Rhodes. We love the Mini Moog. Was very integral in the sound making, the sonics. We went and got this Kurzweil 2600 that had a really great piano and strings, and it was just kind of different than what everybody else was using at the time. Everybody was into this product, Roland or Korg, and I had I acquired a Kurzweil, which was a German-made keyboard that was, very popular, in the European states, or down there, and I started putting it on there, and it just made so much sonic sense with Johnny's drum beat.
So what you're saying, Ronnie, is that the technology was really informing the playing in a sense.
Yeah, agreed.
Now the harmony and the melodic content, was that informed by the funk and the music of the time as well?
Yeah, kind of with all that. A lot of that sometimes came from us just sitting there and Johnny going, "Hey, listen to this song. What are they doing on this song?" I'd be like, that's a Fender Rhodes, or that's a Moog, and this is the sound." And I just go, he'd be like, "Yeah, that's the sound."
Did you play with El DeBarge?
I played with DeBarge. L was not in the group. He did a couple shows with us. I played with Marty and James. I toured with them for, I don't know, a couple years, and that was pretty fan. Those boys are very gifted. They're aliens, man. I mean, the way they play the keyboards, I'm like, how did you do that? They just had a feel that was uniquely their own.
Now, is that around a similar time frame, or is that a little bit later?
Yeah, around the same time. Yeah.
You also worked with Snoop Dogg as well. Could you talk about your work with Snoop Dogg?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was kind of an easier one, I guess. Being at Death Row, everybody from everybody was there. And basically I was very exclusive to Johnny J and Tupac. I didn't really go out into any of the other studios and play or whatever, just because we were so busy with the Tupac stuff. So all those guys were always around. And then a producer called me, Fred Reck, who was producing for Snoop and is actually on his Martha Stewart TV show. Fred's been with Snoop for a very long time. And he said, "Man, come, because I know your style would be so great on this record with Snoop." So I showed up to the studio, really, and they're like, "This is Ronnie King," and everybody's like, "Yeah, we know who he is." Da 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 da, and walked in and said my piece. How you doing? How you doing? And just got to work, and yeah, it was cool. I mean, Snoop is very easy. He's exactly like you see him, man. He's a easygoing guy.
How's he different from Tupac then in working with him? What are the differences?
Well, like I say, he's very easygoing. Very easygoing. Very much. You know what the interesting thing is, and I think I said it before. As an artist, they know who they are. That's the easiest way I can put it in kind of layman's terms, or in a way that's very understandable. They know who they are, and they know what they are, and they know where they want to be. So Snoop, he's exactly like the dude you see. He's just chill, loves to kick back, very loose. Pac was a little different. Pac was very political. There was a little different energy going on there, and Tupac was a teacher. He was an educator. So all the guys that would come up under him, like the Outlaws, and I mean, they were getting an education in the studio. They had a little bit more aggressive kind of teacher going on. And Snoop wasn't really trying to teach anybody anything. He was just, "This is me, make me a great track. I'm going to get on it. I'm just easygoing.
You mentioned DeBarge. You've also played with some superstars, Mariah Carey. Describe your work with Mariah.
Well, she, once again, she knows who she is. She knows what she is. She knows her abilities. She was fantastic. We just sat down. I sat down with a producer, Damian Young, and I brought my Moog in, and that's what I brought. And then usually studios had a lot of equipment there. So, but I had my kind of special, I don't know, this particular Moog that I had, I don't know, it just had a sound that worked on a lot of records. And so I would just use that superstitiously, I guess. And I walked in, and she was very polite and very nice, and so nice to meet you, and relaxed. And she goes, "Here's the song." And she's sitting at the board, and she pushes play, and there must have been 150 tracks of vocals, man. I'm like, whoa, that was big. Because with DeBarge, it's so funny. They wanted me to produce some music with them. So they came in, and at the time, the studio I was at only had a 24 track reel to reel because we were on reel to reel at that time. And James DeBarge looks at me and goes, "Man, we can do this, but dude, don't ever call me again unless you got 48
Oh,
tracks." And I looked, I said, "What, dude? Like,
wow.
come on! Like, we can't do it with 24." He's like, "That's not really how we get down, man. I need 48. I need,
That's a
And
lot
that
of
was
tracks.
way before Pro Tools. Hey, so Mariah must have had, I don't know how many strung up together, analog. And yeah, she turned that thing on. I went, whoa, that was big. And she goes, "Hey, I want to put the Moog right here." I'm like, "Okay." And she goes, and she started singing this melody, right? I'm like, "Okay." And my little analytical mind's like, "Okay." And then the process probably took no more than 5 minutes, which would be about two times through the song.
Which song is this, Ronnie? Which track is this?
It's on Rainbow. It's called Crybaby. Actually, Snoop is on it as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like an R&B, of course, type of track. And yeah, and I just went in there, put 3 or 4 Moog parts on and some Fender Rhodes, and that was it. But she had it so tight and so together, and she was so nice. I mean, she knows what she's doing, and I think the big celebrities that I've worked with, uh, they all know what they're doing. I work with a lot of up and comers, and they don't really know what they know they want to get there, but they've missed one component, and that's like know what you're doing. At least be the best you can be, at least, right?
You mentioned that Mariah, she knew exactly what she was doing and she was very in control of the overall sound. That's refreshing because you can get artists who are just, they don't want anything to do with that, the production side. But it kind of affects the overall production if you don't have any real understanding of your vision and what you want to do with it.
It does. She sets the tone, and there's no doubt that with her, it's a little more in detailed. Like maybe DeBarge is more in detail because they're singers, so they have a lot of tracks that they got to put on, and they have to be. At that time, they didn't have like all the technology we had, so they had to be really good. I mean, they had to be exceptionally good. And I think a lot of records of the early days before all that vocal technology came in, they had to just be a little bit better than everybody else. I think a lot of bit better, really. And we, like you said a word before, these were very important artists of that time. They were setting the pace for the rest of the industry to follow, not only the production value, but also the attention to detail, and to be able to pull that off live and do all these different things. But she was very much in control. Great time. I've seen her a few times since then. I have a lot of friends working with her now on her live show in Vegas, and it's just it was really just a treat to play on such a monumental record, I guess.
Now, at the same time, well, in the 90s, you were also having a very lucrative and successful punk career. You worked with major punk bands at the time, Offspring, Rancid. So
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit, how did you also get into punk? Almost two, they seem like diametrically opposed, but not really, because they do have similarities in a sense, but sound-wise they're different. So how did you get into punk at the same time?
Well, that was an interesting thing when I was on tour with Timmy T. My stage manager and roadie said, "Man, you got to get out of this hip hop thing you're in. It's never going to go anywhere." And I've got this Jack Grisham from TSOL who makes a lot of records, and I said, "Okay, well, I didn't know much about it," and so he gave me the song, the record that they did, and there was some sampling, a little bit. He was trying to change from music, from the punk rock scene just being a guitar driven thing to having samples and some keyboards. So I went to the audition and I had all the samples ready. We played that thing, played the songs, and I was, you know, like I say, you have to kind of know who you are, why you're there, make it happen, hit the mark. And so I call the marks, and then Jack's like, "You're my guy. I need a guy like you in my life." And we ended up writing music in Hollywood for, I don't know, about 4 years. And what we would do is, and that in those beautiful days, you would get signed to a record deal, and so they would say, "Here's a crazy amount of money. Go in, show us what kind of record you're going to make, and then we'll decide whether we're going to pick you up or not in 30 days." Well, a lot of the record companies, but they'd give you this crazy amount of money to go in and do that, right? So we had a producer, Julian Raymond, who's fantastically huge now in the country music scene. And we would go and we would get these deals, and our attorney would make the deals. And we probably walked from 4 or 5 record companies because they only had 30 days to either sign us for like $1 million or not. And so a lot of times, people would get fired within those times. The climate changed, this would change. And so they would go, "Well, yeah, okay, we gave you this amount of money and we're not going to have you." So we would just go to another record company. Well, we were sitting there on a major deal, and Jack goes, "We're going to quit doing all of that, and we're going to go with Epitaph Records," which was Brett Gurwitz, who was the producer of The Offspring. The record label was one of the first independent record companies that were really making a huge mark on music. And everybody was on the label. The Offspring was there, No Effects, Pennywise, Adolescents, the Vandals. I mean, the entire, really, West Coast punk music scene was on that label. So we signed a 3-year, 5-year deal with Epitaph. And just from being around, you befriend a lot of the people. And Brian Holland came to me one day and said, "Hey, man, we want you to start recording records with us." And so we recorded a bunch of songs together, and a couple of them made the cut.
No, wait a second. So there's something interesting. Now you play keyboards. Now that is not normally associated with punk music, right? You mentioned you would have to change things in your playing to make it work, and you did make it work.
Yes. So one of the first songs I did with The Offspring was called "Hit That." It became a pretty big, I don't know, multi-million selling record. And Brian, we'd sit there in the studio, and goes, "Dude, I want you to do that Dr. Dre stuff on this record." I'm like, "How am I going to do that? I mean, it's not even the same." "Dude, you can do it. You'll figure it out." So we sat there, and I forget who the producer was. Could have been Tom Wilson or Bob Rock, one of them.
Is it Brendan O'Brien?
It was Brendan O'Brien. That's exactly right. Right. And and so we just sat there and we went through it. And he's like, "Put some clavinet keyboard on it." Like, he was really pushing me to go outside my realm. And that's Brian Holland. He's the outside dude, obviously. And he's a biochem major from USC. So he told me one time how he would write songs. He would do it like a biochem songs and sounds, and just like any other producer would do, and or songwriter or whatever. And that was the start of that. And he's like, "Dude, you got to go on tour with us." And then that was like, I toured with him for, I don't know, 8 years or so. At the same time, I'd go on tour, I'd come back, go to Death Row, and really in the same day, I would just studio hop. I'd go from a Tupac session to an Offspring session, and then No Effects would call me, "Hey, can you fly up here tomorrow to San Francisco?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm open." And then fly, it was an amazing time in music. Not because the finances were there and everybody was doing good in those genres, but it just happened to be that time for everybody before the digital age started, Now,
here's a question I have. How did these California punk bands, what were they doing that revived punk in the 90s? Now, this is a genre that's actually much older. How did they rejuvenate that genre?
Well, I'm gonna just say that they were very informed about where the history of punk came from. So they they studied and really got under their skin what the angst or the condition of what made punk rock. And then we were kind of into pop music, so then that's how the genre punk pop kind of came in, because it got real poppy. It got real pop, like radio type, because the Sex Pistols and all those guys, they were on the radio, but Epitaph really had a genre of music that, I don't know, with Bad Religion kind of led the way, I think, a lot. The Vandals, and so the energy of the punk was there, but then the um the pop music and the studio levels, and then you get these big producers in there, and they're all doing pop records and big records, so they kind of combined all that into one song, basically.
Were you familiar with punk from the 70s yourself?
I got into that with Jack Grisham, definitely. He really schooled me on a lot of bands like The Damned and the bands that he liked that had a lot of because there was a lot of keyboards in early punk. I mean, Blondie and the Ramones, maybe not so much, but there was a lot of bands out there that had keyboards in it. Nobody kind of realized that, but there was a lot going on there. In the early days, and then all that kind of went popular with Blondie. I mean, she started as straight punk, kind of in a way, and then moved into like a popular kind of started using hip hop producers, and all that started working, and then so it just kind of kept going, kept developing, and then on the West Coast we just kind of followed suit and started making these pop punk songs, with the keyboards were all in there. Sometimes they're so in there you don't even know it's I used to put like a lot of fuzz on the keyboards and tried to make it sonically fit inside where the guitars were, and then the piano stuff was real big with like the Damned, and the strings were definitely in there, and we had always just manipulate it so it wouldn't overtake the guitars, but it would definitely enhance the bigness of it,
Ronnie, I want to ask you a couple of quick fun questions now that I always like to ask guests. And just, you can give me quick answers or you can take your time with them. What were your top 3 hip hop records that you worked on?
Oh, geez, the hip hop. Some of them never came out. I mean, working with Richie Rich, I had worked with so many artists like King T. Working with Battle Cat was surely a highlight. Some of the records never even saw the light of day, but just being in that deep trenched genre, working with Easy Lee, the producer of Kool Mo D, was a highlight, which some of that music never came out. So you got to figure out of the 100 songs you would make in that genre, maybe 5 would actually see the light of day. You know what I mean? So, of course, working with Tupac, my favorite. Snoop, of course, is a fave. I worked with Craig Mack out of New York. That was really cool. That was really fun. I guess those would be the 3. Working with Busy Bone from Bone Thugs and Harmony was amazing. And even working with Mark Wahlberg was pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. How did you guys work together?
We worked together on some soundtracks. He was just getting into his acting career. And I think, geez, I'm forgetting the name of the movie.
The big hit, Boogie Nights, Traveler.
Big Hit. That's what it was, the big hit.
All right.
Wasn't that Wesley Snipes? No. But we were doing so many soundtracks. The first soundtrack I ever did was with Kid Frost on the Crow soundtrack with Mr. Mix from Two Live Crew, the producer. That was a pretty fun one. And then Coolio, we had a soundtrack. We did Nothing to Lose on that one. We did American Me with Kid Frost, was really fun soundtrack. And these were, what's so funny is because all these things became classics, it's like weird, but they were such a time. I do remember the song I did with Mark Wahlberg called Don't Sleep. And he kind of looked at us and goes, I'm going to hang up my rapping shoes. I don't think he's rapped ever since.
Now let's.
He made the last Mark Wahlberg rap song.
Oh, by the way, before we move on from hip hop, are there recordings of hip hop that perhaps you were not involved in that you admire?
God, I used to listen to Brand Nubian. I love the East Coast hip hop a lot. I love Run DMC, which I worked on a record not long ago, about 2 years ago, with Exodus and Run DM with the Daryl from DMC. That was an interesting record as well. I loved Run DMC. I loved Brand Nubian. I love the East Coast stuff. It just seemed to be really,
What are the big differences between West Coast and East Coast?
Well, I think the East Coast had more sampling, less live playing. And then when the West Coast got a hold of it, we're like, hey, man, we can put real basses and real keyboards. And, we started putting a lot of music, like Puff Daddy. I mean, some of those early Puff Daddy songs were just all samples,
Let's move on to punk now. So top 3 punk recordings that you worked on.
Oh, of course, The Offspring was great. I loved working with No Effects.
Okay, with The Offspring, give me 3 tracks that you really are special to you.
Oh, that I was on? Well, Hit That was really special. And then there was a song on Conspiracy of One. And then we did a record, I don't know, about 3 years ago maybe, called Days Gone By, I think was the name of the album. And the track name was, God, I don't even remember the track name. Sorry.
All I Have Left Is You, OC Guns, Dirty Magic.
OC Guns.
Okay.
OC Guns. That was that was another one of those, hey, make it sound like Dre type of thing. It was
right.
just like such a wild combination of everything. But, I love, in my punk world, I just love the Vandals, and I love all the Epitaph bands that, I love performing and playing with Pennywise, and those are kind of just embedded in me, I guess. But I really do appreciate Jack Grisham for turning me on to some real different kind of punk rock music, like The Damned and all that. Really helped me out quite a bit and trying to find my voice inside of punk music.
Now, you're a really eclectic musician and producer because you're very well known for punk and hip hop, but you've produced classical recordings too. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm doing more. That's my new thing that I'll be doing.
That's so full circle, right? When you were studying as a child.
Yeah, it's really fun. We are now working on kind of the Ronnie King. Well, just for an easy name, it'll be Ronnie King and Friends, let's just say. And it's like all of my big artists that I've ever worked with, I'm going to take their biggest songs and make them into symphonic songs, but yet also combine the real elements of where it came from. So like with The Offspring, maybe I'll do Come Out and Play and do it in an orchestra kind of a way, and just kind of bring those songs into where I'm at. I work with the Seattle Symphony. I've got a symphony out of Kiev that are going to be doing a lot of my work now. And I really just, if you can look at the vision of the black grand piano with the orchestra, and then the singers will be the actual singers. If you could get Mariah on there, if Snoop, have him come up and sing in front of an orchestra and really bring it to kind of that genre. I just went and saw Andre Bocelli, and he does that a lot because of his producer, David Foster, who I kind of am really in tune with right now, where he does that quite a bit. So that's just kind of my new thing, but everybody's like, man, you're the best guy to do it because you have all that range with it, and you would be able to really, so everybody's on board. So we're really excited. I've written some songs for the new record.
Now, do you do the orchestration as well with the orchestra?
Yeah. I sure do.
Let me ask you a technical question. Do you use that pencil and paper, or do you use some Finale or Dorico or something?
I just play it on the keyboards. I actually use Logic, which is a program that notates pretty well. and I just play the parts, and then it just prints it out. And then sometimes you got to go back and fix notation and whatnot. But yeah, no, I do it. We do it on the computers these days. It's just so much. It's so much more hands on. The lost art of writing definitely is something I used to love to do, but yeah, now when you get a little further on, time, all you have is time.
Right.
So if you're there going, man, am I really going to sit here for a day and write this out when I can really do it in an hour and have it printed, you know?
Now, one thing that I think is the same way that you took the keyboard and made it work for punk, I'm sure you're always thinking about how you arrange these things so that they work. That's the most important thing, right? Like, you seem to have this ability to make things musically make sense. Is that something you can constantly consider?
I do. I'm definitely an arranger. So I'm definitely even when I write or when I start a new song or something like that, I'm always kind of thinking about the arrangement and how the music plays through the whole song, before I even get into the details of the chords and the lyrics, the arrangement of it, which is, hey, sometimes you want to start with the strings, or sometimes you want to start out with the vocal, however, whatever the mechanism may be, or maybe my big thing now is I'm like really back into the grand piano. So most of the songs that I'm venturing in, you can kind of think it more like Coldplay, where they're very keyboard piano oriented in their music, right? Keen, I love that band from England, and it's so funny because the English bands have really, since they are from more of a classical, you know, oriented world, their music kind of comes out that way. So yes, it'll be very piano and string oriented, and the piano will definitely play a big part in it. And I think that's why a lot of the artists that I'll have on my record are very excited for it, because they're like, dude, that's you. That's where you come from, and we're so happy that you're going to do it because we're in for it.
When it comes to punk and hip hop, I notice heart really is a factor that really makes them both related in my mind. There's a lot of heart in both of those genres. Now, that's important, right, to you, and you really want music to have heart. Could you talk about how that influences your compositions?
Yeah, I always said punk rock and rap and hip hop were basically just different sides of the same coin. They were both kind of like outcast type of music, and then it became popularized. So the way I kind of see, music is like you got to come from that place of the origins of the music. So even like classical music, I mean, I'm hopefully I can educate symphonies to play with more heart. And when you've got 100 people that you're trying to conduct and you're trying to, convey a message to, you kind of got to be pretty clear about it. And I played with some of the Seattle Symphony guys not long ago, 3 or 4 months ago, and I was just like, yeah, man, just have fun with it and let it go. You're not under the gun. Nobody's gonna, you know what I mean? And just by giving people the platform to be themselves and to be free in their music, wow, man, when they started playing the strings like that, I was like, that's cool. That's exactly, and you kind of help people motivate into the genre, I guess, or the experience.
Now, you also did you write a book on your experiences?
We're writing right now. Yeah, we're writing right now. It's called Punks and Thugs.
Talk about the book, and when will we be able to read the book?
Well, I'm doing all of my, talking on the little microphone and telling the stories. And then when I go see my buddies around, I say, hey, you remember this story? And so I'm compiling all of the funny stories kind of behind the scenes of how this music was made, kind of like what we're talking about, the conversations between Brian Holland and I from The Offspring, or the conversations between Fat Mike, or the conversations with Battle Cat, or it's like the funny stuff that would kind of like, wow, you remember that? And they totally remember it. And we all just kind of like, it all kind of comes back. So it's sort of a behind the scenes look into punk and rap music of when I came up, in the 90s, basically. And a lot of the people are not around anymore. So it's kind of like I may have to convey their stories a bit. Because they're not around anymore. So I get to kind of tell maybe a voice for some of our fallen brothers that are not here. And I think that'll be really cool. And then also to kind of just convey the message that you can be in all this different kind of music if you just kind of just be nice and be cool and don't, we call it social climbing, don't be all about the end result and getting the money and the fame and the thing, but really be there present with which is happening at the moment, And the symphonic part's going to be a part of it because, making this new record, and it'll probably come about the same time, and it'll be this next year after January to bring the book out and then to bring the new record out. It'll really coincide with kind of my whole journey and where I'm going further. I'm loving the movies, soundtracks I'm doing. I mean, I'm just so, I don't know. I'm really excited about the new page, and I think that's a big part of music too, is you have to reinvent yourself and find new loves, for music just to keep your music alive, and to keep what's in your heart going and to have the, called the connectivity. Like anybody who's going to be on my record is going to be a platinum selling or more artist, right? So it'll be Reese or the Outlaws. I'd love to have them on it. I'd love to have Kid Frost and Mellow Man. And just, I think if I can achieve that, then I think not only would it be a good, a phenomenal record for a lot of people, but it would also be something that could be profitable for today. And I think it could see the light of day because within the business, it takes money to get this stuff out to the public. And it's a world music. I have Ravano from Two Unlimited is going to be on the record, and they did. Remember that song? Y'all ready for this? Dun, 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 dun. Can you imagine that song or something like it in a symphonic, but still funky and dance? And man, it's such a huge vision. I don't think a lot of people have done it. We've seen it like on the Grammy Awards with, Metallica doing, their songs with the orchestra, and there's been bits of it. And I know I just heard a record from Ibiza from Peter Tong, who's kind of like the godfather of Ibiza, dance music. They had a thing where they did all of his hit songs with the orchestra, and it's really cool, man. It's really, so it's not necessarily new, but I'm just going to give it a new look and a new voice,
Let's end off with one final question, which is, what advice could you give to an up-and-coming producer or musician who perhaps wants to make it in this industry?
Yeah. Well, it's a different industry than when I started, no doubt, and it's a different industry than when Jerry Heller started, and when the 50s or when Elvis started. It's a different world. So today's world is really, I think, one, will the music last past this year? So you take a lot of these artists, right, that are playing, and they're really making a great impression on the kids. And I think that the music, we're moving so fast, and our attention spans are very short, and But I've been so, I don't know, excited about the records I've done. They're classic records. It's almost like working with Smokey Robinson or working with Elvis. I mean, these records will be around forever. I don't know if Little Yachty's going to be around forever. I'd like for him to be, but I just think that for artists coming up in today's music, try to really make music that will span the test of time. And only time kind of knows that, you know. But also at at the same time, you know, you've got two parts to it. You got the businessman part of it, and then you got your artist part of it. And you're like, hey, man, I'm an artist. I'm going to do my thing, and that's the way I'm going to do it. And that's just the way it is. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, great, or whatever. And if that's your case, awesome. Make music just for yourself. And if it hits and people want to finance it and they want to be about it and all that stuff, that's absolutely fantastic. But what I find is a lot of new artists, they want to make a career. They want to have a nice car. They want to have a life, a financial life, right? So, take the page out of all the way the music business is going, how people are like really able to navigate the music to where it needs to go, you know. Like I talked about the Ibiza music scene. I mean, nobody really knew that scene was going to be as hot as it is, but it's hot. So they were doing it for the reasons of, hey, we want to show people how cool it is out on this island in the middle of Spain, and it became popular. And then, these DJs are having a very nice lifestyle, right? So I would say for the new artist, one, don't social climb so much. Don't try to already be done with it and have the money in the bank and have the rolls. And when you do get the money leaves real quick. And if you want to see a really great movie on just that one thing, look at the Scott Storch new kind of documentary they're doing about him. This guy was worth $170 million, had yachts and everything, and lost it all, just because the music business changed. The royalties weren't coming in the same way. They weren't paying him $150,000 a track. That's hard to find these days, So don't chase the money, but chase the money. Don't, interpret the music the way you want to do it and be that, but don't be so, arrogant or set on that's the way it's going to go down. You know what I mean? Like, be real flexible. And I think in that, artists can have a career in any business. I think flexibility right now is important in any kind of intellectual property. I think it's important in movies. I think it's important in financing. I think it's important in the digital streaming world. They have to be flexible, because, we don't even want to get into the musical streaming aspect of life. That's still not done yet. And there's a lot of people like myself that write music and that make, a living off of our record sales and all this stuff. And we're getting shorted, and there's no doubt about it. Everybody knows it. I'm not on a soapbox about it, but that has to change, and it has to change within the world scheme of things, So, we have to be aware of what intellectual property is. It's just not us sitting in the studio. Hey, even if we write a song in 15 minutes and it sells, 2 million copies, they're like, well, that doesn't seem like you should get a bunch of money for that. It's like, man, we should, It's like Timmy, he did his record for $800, had a #1 hit in the country, but what are you going to say? Oh, you shouldn't get the proceeds from that, So just have fun, but stay focused and stay aware of where the business is going as well as your creativity. That's all I can say.
Well, what can I say? The legendary producer and musician Ronnie King, thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to talk to us. We really appreciate it. Sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience. I mean, I really hope you'll come back on the show again, and I really hope you if you can, why don't you come over to Singapore? We would love to have you and show,
I would love
LA, I know LA has nice weather, but Singapore is pretty nice too, so you should consider coming down.
I want to. I have a band that I'm producing now, Big Mountain, which is a reggae band from, they've written so many songs, but they're out there now. I mean, you guys really get the best music. I mean, you get a lot of great music. I mean, from around the world. I mean, everybody wants to come and share the music. All through Asia. I mean, David Foster, the guy that I just admire, and I think he's doing. I think he's real strong in the Asia's Got Talent movement. Where they're doing. A lot of stuff. And I mean, the K-pop stuff I've been involved with. I mean, hey, we're in a world market and we should all be together because there's nothing like traveling and seeing how other people live. And it makes an effect on you. And if it affects you, it's going to affect your music. And good for the world, and we really need that in the world right now. We
I'm
need to
so
all
glad
be
you
together.
say that. I'm so glad you say that because that means we'll have you come over and then we can hang out and we can talk music even more.
I would love to. I'd love to talk to the kids. I'd love to perform. I'd love to bring bands. I'd love, whatever you need, brother.
Well, Ronnie, a true legend, fantastic musician, and so much history in his career. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.
You too, my friend. I look forward to hearing from you again.